The sharp ring of the doorbell sliced through the quiet of a crisp Sunday morning in Chicago. Emily Harper, 28, froze mid-sip, her coffee mug hovering near her lips. Her cozy 700-square-foot apartment in Lincoln Park, a hard-earned symbol of her independence, was her sanctuary. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw her parents, David and Susan Carter, standing in the hallway. Her father's jaw was set, his eyes hard with purpose. Her mother fidgeted, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Emily's stomach churned. She knew that look. It wasn't a social call. Surprise visit? Emily forced a smile, opening the door. Her mother's hug was tight, her familiar lavender perfume pulling Emily back to childhood. Her father offered a curt nod, his gaze sweeping her apartment, modest but meticulously curated. From the refinished oak floors to the thrift store furniture she'd lovingly upgraded. "Nice place," he said, but his tone carried an edge, almost accusatory. "Coffee?" Emily offered, trying to diffuse the tension. "No time for that," David snapped. Susan shot him a glance. "What your father means is we have something important to discuss." They settled in her small living room, her parents on the couch, Emily in the armchair. The air was thick with unspoken urgency. "How's everything, Emily?" Susan asked, her hands twisting in her lap. "The apartment looks great. Thanks. I just got a promotion at work." "Actually," Emily replied, hoping to steer the conversation to safer ground. "That's wonderful, honey," Susan said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Enough small talk. We're here about Ryan." Emily's heart sank. Ryan, her older brother, 31, had always been the family's golden boy. Despite his endless string of bad decisions, the mention of his name was like a warning bell. "What about him?" she asked cautiously. "He's in trouble," David said, his voice tight. "Big trouble? What kind of trouble?" Emily pressed, though she could guess the answer. Susan's voice trembled. "He got caught up in some bad investments. Crypto stuff he didn't fully understand. Then he tried to fix it at the casinos. He owes a lot of money." "How much?" Emily's voice was steady, but dread coiled in her chest. 60,000, David said, avoiding her eyes. Emily nearly choked. $60,000? Susan nodded, her eyes glistening. "The people he owes, they're not patient. Emily, they're dangerous." "Where's Ryan now?" "Staying with us," Susan said. "He's too scared to go back to his place." David cleared his throat. "We've done all we can. We drained our savings. Even took out a home equity loan. It's not enough." Emily braced herself. She knew what was coming. But she needed them to say it. "What exactly are you asking me?" David's eyes locked onto hers. "We need you to sell your apartment." The words hit like a punch. Sell her apartment, the one she'd poured her soul into. The one she'd earned through years of grinding, of late nights and skipped vacations. "Sell my apartment?" she repeated, her voice rising despite her effort to stay calm. "And where would I live?" "You could rent for a bit," Susan suggested weakly, "or come back home to Naperville until you're back on your feet." "Back to Naperville? I'm 28, Mom. I have a career in Chicago. I can't commute 2 hours each way." "You'd figure it out," David said, waving off her concern. "This is family we're talking about." "And Ryan?" Emily asked, her anger flaring. "What's his plan to pay me back?" "He'll get back on his feet," David said dismissively. "He always does." "Does he?" Emily shot back. "When has Ryan ever stood on his own without you bailing him out?" "Don't talk about your brother like that," Susan scolded, her voice sharp. David's tone hardened. "This is family money, Emily. We raised you, put a roof over your head. You wouldn't have this place without us." The audacity of his words stunned her into silence. Family money? She'd clawed her way through college, working 3 jobs after her parents used her $35 college fund to pay off Ryan's debts when she was 18. She'd lived in roach-infested apartments, eaten instant noodles for months, and rebuilt her credit after co-signing a loan Ryan defaulted on. This apartment wasn't family money, it was her blood, sweat, and tears. "I think you should leave," Emily said quietly, her voice trembling with restrained fury. We're not going anywhere until this is settled. David insisted. There's nothing to settle, she replied, standing. I'm not selling my apartment. Not for Ryan. Not for anyone. Susan's eyes welled up, her voice breaking. Do you want your brother to end up in jail? Or worse? The manipulation was familiar. A tactic that had worked when Emily was younger. Doubt crept in. Was she being selfish? Was her apartment worth more than her brother's safety? But another voice, the one forged through years of self-reliance, pushed back. This wasn't about a building. It was about a cycle that would never end unless she stopped it. I'll think about it, she said, just to end the conversation. I need time. David stood, taking her words as a concession. We need an answer by Friday. Ryan doesn't have much time. As the door closed behind them, Emily sank onto her couch. The weight of their expectations crushing her. Her apartment, her pride, her proof of overcoming a childhood of being second best, was at risk. But this time, something was different. A spark of defiance flickered inside her. She wasn't that 18-year-old who nodded and gave in. This time, she'd fight for herself. Growing up in the Carter household in Naperville, the family dynamic was clear as day. Ryan, 3 years older, could do no wrong. When he crashed the family SUV at 17, their parents comforted him, blaming the icy roads. When Emily asked for help with her college applications, she was told to figure it out, because she was the smart one. Ryan's basketball games were family pilgrimages, while Emily's debate team victories went unnoticed. His room was a shrine of participation trophies. Her academic awards were tucked away. Forgotten. It wasn't that David and Susan didn't love her, they did. In their way. But their love for Emily came with a price. She was expected to be the rock. The one who never faltered. The breaking point came at 18. Emily had earned a partial scholarship to the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her dream school, her college fund, started by her grandparents and supplemented by her parents, was supposed to cover the rest. She'd spent years preparing, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working part-time at a diner. But one evening, her parents called her to the kitchen table. The memory was vivid, the flickering fluorescent light, the chipped coffee mugs, their uneasy expressions. Emily, Ryan's in trouble, Susan began, twisting her wedding ring. David didn't sugarcoat it. He got mixed up with some bad people. Gambling debts. He owes $35. Emily's heart plummeted. That was her college fund. Dollar for dollar. We need to use it. Susan said softly. Just for now. We'll pay it back before you start school. Against her better judgment, Emily agreed. Family first. They'd always taught her. But the money never came back. Instead of moving into a dorm, Emily rented a cramped room in a shared house. Juggling waitressing shifts, tutoring gigs, and a full course load. Sleep was a distant memory. She applied for every scholarship, skipped meals to afford textbooks, and watched Ryan drop out of community college, drifting from one odd job to the next while living rent-free at home. After graduation, Emily landed a job at a financial consulting firm in Chicago. The irony wasn't lost on her, advising clients on fiscal responsibility while her own financial security had been so fragile. She lived frugally, sharing a tiny apartment with 3 roommates for years, saving every penny. 5 years ago, when she qualified for a mortgage on her Lincoln Park apartment, she held the keys in her trembling hands and wept. It was hers, proof that her sacrifices had meaning. Her relationship with her family remained strained but polite. Holiday dinners, brief phone calls, always with boundaries. Ryan's cycle of debt and bailouts continued, with David and Susan stepping in every time. Emily kept her distance, focusing on her career. 3 months ago, she'd earned a promotion to senior consultant, a milestone that felt like a reward for her resilience. She'd built an emergency fund, started a retirement account, and even dared to plan a weekend getaway, her first in years. Life was finally hers to shape. Until that Sunday morning when the doorbell rang, shattering her peace and pulling her back into the family's chaos. As her parents stood in her living room, demanding she sell her home to save Ryan, Emily felt the weight of her past crashing down. But this time, she wasn't the obedient daughter who'd sacrifice everything. This time, She'd draw a line, and it would change everything. The air in Emily Harper's Chicago apartment felt heavier than ever. The sting of her parents' demand to sell her home still lingered. Like a bruise she couldn't ignore. At 28, Emily had built her life brick by brick. And her 700-square-foot Lincoln Park apartment was more than walls and floors. It was her proof of survival. Her defiance against a childhood of being overshadowed. But now, her parents, David and Susan Carter, wanted her to tear it down to save her brother Ryan, whose gambling debts had spiraled to $60. Their words, family money, echoed in her mind. A twisted justification for asking her to sacrifice everything. Again, Emily couldn't sleep that night. She sat at her small dining table, the one she'd refinished herself during a weekend of sweat and Spotify playlists, staring at a blank notebook. Her parents had given her until Friday to decide. But the ultimatum felt like a noose tightening around her neck. She wasn't that 18-year-old who'd nodded when they took her $35 college fund to bail Ryan out. She needed a plan, one that protected her future while breaking the toxic cycle that had defined her family for too long. The next morning, Emily called her best friend, Mia Torres, a blunt-talking graphic designer who'd been her rock since college. Over coffee at a bustling cafe in Wicker Park, Emily spilled everything. "They want me to sell my apartment," she said, her voice low but shaking. "For Ryan." Again. Mia's eyes widened. "Are you kidding me? After everything you've been through? The college fund, the loan you co-signed that trashed your credit, the endless emergencies, and now this? What's next? Your kidney?" Emily managed a weak laugh. "It's not funny, Mia. They're saying he could end up in jail. Or worse." Mia leaned forward, her dark curls bouncing. "And whose fault is that? Ryan's 31. He's not a kid. You've been cleaning up his messes since you were a teenager. When does it stop?" "I don't know," Emily admitted, stirring her latte. "But if I don't help, and something happens to him, that's their playbook." Mia cut in. "Guilt. They're banking on you folding like always. But you're not that girl anymore. You've got to draw a line." Mia's words stuck with Emily as she walked back to her apartment, the Chicago wind biting at her cheeks. She knew Mia was right. But the fear of losing her family, or worse, losing Ryan to his dangerous creditors, gnawed at her. She needed clarity, not just emotion. That afternoon, she booked a lunch with her mentor, Lauren Brooks, a senior financial advisor at her firm. Over sandwiches at a downtown deli, Emily laid out the situation, her voice steady but raw. "What would you tell a client in my shoes?" she asked. Lauren set down her coffee, her expression serious. "I'd tell them to protect their assets and set firm boundaries. Family complicates things, but you're not a bank. Emily, have you ever quantified how much they've taken from you?" Emily shook her head. "Not exactly. I've tried not to think about it." "Maybe you should," Lauren said. "Numbers don't lie. They might help you see the bigger picture." That night, Emily pulled out a box of old bank statements, tax returns, and loan documents she'd kept in a closet. Under the soft glow of her desk lamp, she created a spreadsheet, meticulously logging every dollar her family had siphoned from her over the years. The $35 college fund, gone at 18, the $15 loan she co-signed for Ryan at 22, which he defaulted on, tanking her credit score and costing her $10 in higher interest rates. The $8 she'd wired for his emergencies over a decade, car repairs, rent, utility bills, the missed career opportunities, jobs she couldn't take because she was stretched too thin. By midnight, the total stared back at her, $87, not counting inflation or the dreams she'd deferred. It was a gut punch, a number that made her sacrifices painfully real. The next day, Emily met with a financial counselor specializing in addiction, recommended by Lauren. She also consulted a lawyer friend, Ethan Nguyen, who helped her draft a formal loan agreement. "You're not just protecting your money," Ethan said, adjusting his glasses. "You're protecting your peace." Armed with data and a plan, Emily prepared for the inevitable confrontation. She texted her mother, "Saturday, 10 a.m. my place. Ryan needs to be there too." When Saturday arrived, Emily felt a strange calm. Her dining table was set with coffee and pastries. A deliberate attempt to keep things civil. The doorbell rang precisely at 10. Ryan stood between their parents. Looking like a shadow of his former self, unkempt hair, bloodshot eyes, his usual charm replaced by a mix of defiance and shame. "Come in," Emily said, stepping aside. Susan tried to hug her, but Emily kept her distance. Gesturing to the table, "Let's sit." David wasted no time. "Have you made a decision?" "We're out of time." "I have," Emily said, her voice steady. "But first, I want to talk about what you called family money." She slid a manila envelope across the table. David opened it, pulling out her spreadsheet. Susan leaned over, her face paling as she scanned the numbers. "What's this?" David asked, his tone sharp. "An accounting of what I've contributed to this family," Emily said. $87,000. Conservatively. College fund, loans, emergencies, all for Ryan. "You've been keeping score?" David's face reddened. "Not score," Emily corrected. "Records. There's a difference." Susan's voice trembled. "This can't be right. 87,000? "It's documented," Emily said. "Bank transfers, loan agreements, credit reports. I have it all." Ryan glanced at the spreadsheet, his defiance faltering. For the first time, he looked ashamed. "Why are you doing this?" Susan asked, tears brimming. "Because you need to see what's at stake," Emily said. "This isn't just about my apartment. It's about a pattern that's been bleeding me dry for years." "So you're refusing to help?" David snapped. "Your brother could die, and you're worried about your bank account?" "I didn't say I wouldn't help," Emily said, placing a second envelope on the table. "But I have conditions." "Conditions?" David scoffed. "We're family, not a business. Funny how that hasn't stopped you from treating my money like a family ATM." Emily shot back. She opened the envelope, pulling out 3 documents. First, Ryan enrolls in a gambling addiction recovery program. Immediately. Full commitment. "I don't have an addiction," Ryan muttered. "You've lost over $150 gambling," Emily said, her voice firm. "What do you call that?" He had no answer. She continued, sliding the second document forward. "This is a loan agreement. I'll cover Ryan's most urgent debts, the ones that threaten his safety. In return, he signs this, agreeing to repay me with interest. On a clear schedule. A contract between siblings?" Susan gasped, horrified. "Yes," Emily said, "because history shows I can't trust promises." Ryan flinched, but stayed silent. Emily placed the final document on the table. Third, Ryan meets weekly with a financial counselor who specializes in addiction recovery. "I've already found someone. And if I say no?" Ryan asked, finally meeting her eyes. "Then I don't help," Emily said simply. "Your choice." David stood, his chair scraping the floor. "This is blackmail." "No," Emily said calmly. "This is a boundary. I'm willing to help, but not by enabling the same cycle." Susan reached for her hand. "Can't we handle this as a family? Without all these papers?" "We've tried that for 10 years. Mom," Emily said. "It's never worked." The room fell silent. Then, unexpectedly, Ryan spoke, his voice barely audible. "She's right." David turned to him, stunned. "What?" "She's right," Ryan repeated, louder. "About the pattern, the enabling. My problem. I'll sign the papers. I'll do the program. Whatever it takes." Susan's tears fell freely now. Not manipulative but raw, born of relief and grief. David looked from the spreadsheet to Ryan, then to Emily, his face a storm of emotions. 87,000, he muttered, almost to himself. "All this time? It's not just the money," Emily said softly. "It's about changing the pattern." For the first time, Emily saw something shift in her father's eyes, not anger or disappointment, but a flicker of respect. The power dynamic had changed, and she felt it. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Ryan enrolled in the gambling addiction program, showing up every day without fail, a first for him. He started working at a local hardware store, a modest job but one he stuck with, earning his first steady paycheck in years. The loan agreement was signed, and though the monthly payments were small, their consistency was a quiet victory. Emily's parents struggled to adjust. David, a stubborn man of 62, initially retreated into silence, his pride bruised. But a month later, he called Emily out of the blue. "I started seeing a therapist," he admitted, his voice gruff. "Your mother's idea. Something about patterns. It's hard. Emily, I'm trying to see you differently." Susan joined a support group for families of addicts, where she began to unravel her role in enabling Ryan. "I thought love meant fixing everything," she told Emily over tea one afternoon. "I didn't realize I was hurting him, and you." They set up a modest repayment plan, transferring $200 a month to Emily's account. It wasn't much, but it was an acknowledgement, a step toward accountability. Emily herself began therapy with Dr. Rachel Cohen, a specialist in family dynamics. "You've been the family's fixer for so long," Rachel said during their first session. "Setting boundaries feels like betrayal because you've been conditioned to prioritize others." Through weekly sessions, Emily unpacked the resentment she'd buried, the hurt of being overlooked, the guilt of saying no. She learned to see her worth beyond her role as the responsible one. At work, Emily's newfound confidence shone. She took on leadership roles, mentoring younger colleagues and pitching a financial literacy program for high schoolers, a passion project she'd long shelved. Her personal life blossomed too. She met Noah Patel, a 30-year-old environmental engineer, at a networking event. His thoughtful questions about sustainable investing led to late-night conversations, then dates filled with laughter and mutual respect. Unlike past partners who leaned on her caretaking nature, Noah saw her boundaries as strength. "You're not selfish for protecting your space," he told her one evening, his hand warm in hers. "It's why you're so incredible." 6 months after that fateful Sunday, Emily hosted a dinner in her apartment. The guest list was small but significant: Mia, Noah, her parents, and Ryan. The table was set with candles and a spread of homemade lasagna, a nod to her mother's recipe. The conversation wasn't perfect. Old tensions surfaced, quickly smoothed over with newfound honesty. Ryan shared that he'd received a raise at work, a small but proud milestone. David raised a glass, his voice steady but emotional. "To Emily," he said, "for teaching us that love sometimes means saying no." As glasses clinked, Emily felt a weight lift. The journey wasn't over, trust was still fragile, and old habits lingered. But by refusing to sacrifice her home, her peace, herself, she'd carved out space for something better. She'd shown her family that love doesn't mean endless giving, it means holding people accountable, even when it's hard. And in doing so, she'd given them all a chance to heal. What would you do if your family asked you to give up everything you've built? How do you set boundaries without losing the ones you love? Share your stories below. And if this resonated, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of courage and change. Because saying no isn't selfish, it's the start of something strong.